Greetings again, Alex Alien Nerd here, and I've decided to go into a little more all in on these longer form video essays where I talked about disturbing movies, holiday movies, or Doctor Who. I've seen every episode of Doctor Who, and the problem I have with sitting down and doing a Doctor Who explained video is that its official continuity doesn't exist. And what I mean by that is in one season of Classic Who, there were two deconstructions of Atlantis that contradict each other, also not including a third one way back in the Troughton years. Now imagine 60 years of stuff like that with nobody sorting through it. Now imagine there being comic books, novels, audio dramas, and even video games that are in there. Actually, I've played two Doctor Who games and they're both terrible, so me throwing those out is no big loss. Okay then, imagine New Who taking those audio dramas and books and remaking them into New Who episodes. Going through every adaptation and retcon and stuff that contradicts other things would take way too much time and effort. However, there is one part of Doctor Who that I've neglected to even touch: the spin offs. Well, I tell a lie. The only one I have seen is K9 and Company, and save for the single cheesiest, so bad it's good intro of the 80s, or at very least the top 5, the rest of it being about a robot dog shooting Satanists is nowhere near as fun as that intro would have you believe. It doesn't have anything to really latch onto as an amazing piece of 80s kids TV cheese, and that is my biggest problem with it. I do know that there's an Australian K9 show, but it seems to change so much that it's both unanimously hated by the fans, from what I hear, from what I've been led to believe, and has so little to do with Doctor Who that it appears to throw what little is consistent out the window. All I'm saying is that I am Australian and I have never seen a home video release of this show. So that's not a good sign considering that it was broadcast from 2009 to 2010, which was slightly before streaming really took off and physical media is still hanging in there over here. I thought, considering I talked about K9 and Sarah Jane, that I should start with the Sarah Jane Adventures. I'll just go through episode by episode of the first series. The Invasion of the Bane is a decent pilot. It starts with Maria arriving into a new town that looks exactly like early New Who. Sarah. The Doctor called her Sarah before New Who, so she's called Sarah, my favourite Doctor says. I've explained the canon issue, so there really is no case for calling her Sarah or Sarah Jane that isn't flimsy. So my favourite Doctor says this is, if your favourite Doctor says my Sarah Jane, then make your own video. So, Sarah's her neighbour. Both find trouble with aliens and team up to stop it, except Sarah doesn't have the resources the Doctor or even Unit does, so she's a bit hesitant to bring a kid with her, but she comes around by the end. The villain here is an evil soda company. Yeah, this is very clearly more geared towards kids than the whole family like regular Who is, but honestly, I like the cheesiness of everything. I feel like the overarching villains does more in its favour here than it ever did in early New Who. Even when the concept got, for lack of a better word, crazy. I say this because Classic Who has giant telepathic super genius crabs forcing humans to mine gas they need to stay alive. The crazy concepts of New Who have nowhere near that level of imagination. Either way, they find a child grown in their lap, so Sarah adopts him and calls him Luke. He's used to milk the comedy out of being born yesterday yet a super genius. It doesn't really work. I never really liked the comedy of David's era Who, so I just find stuff like this stilted and awkward more than anything else. K9 is shelved though, which I don't know. What harm could a laser shooting dog do to this idea? Little things I picked up on were the Sonic lipstick is a bit like the Sonic sunglasses and the Sonic screwdriver. I'm convinced that these writers think that if they just put Sonic before something or screwdriver after another, it's all of a sudden believable. Remember Ant-Man and the Wasps putting Quantum in front of everything? That's basically Doctor Who's writers. It's lipstick, not a lockpick. Having K9 used to unlock doors or keep them open would be better. either way, it's a good pilot for this sort of thing, and unlike other shows I tried getting into, there is something here to latch onto if you're not the target audience. I say this because shows like Ben 10, Thundercats, He-Man, and Powerpuff Girls, yes, I have watched all of these, are fine. I just don't have anything to latch onto in terms of coming back to them because I'm not a child and I never had cable TV back when they were broadcast, so I can't treat it as a nostalgic time bomb either, so I'm very much an outsider looking in on those shows. It's also why I don't feel comfortable with talking about them in any meaningful capacity. Just as a side note, the rest of these episodes of the season are all going to be two-parters. I'd like to review both parts at once so I don't waste anyone's time with repeating myself. Revenge of the Slitheen is next, and honestly, Aliens of London and World War III are two episodes of New Who that showed severe growing pains as to what it wanted to be, and honestly, it felt more childish than the invasion of the Bane half the time. That combined with my distaste for the humour in the Davies era, and a writer apparently adding stuff that got him kicked off. People like these episodes for nostalgic reasons, but watching them as an adult put me in the same position as I was when giving those cartoons a go, except those were worse. If today a disproportionate amount of Who episodes today involved fart jokes, we'd never hear the end of it. That's all I'm saying. I just want to illustrate my expectations. The fart jokes are still there. I don't know what I expected. However, there is one thing that always redeems something that may not be that great in my eyes, and that is a campy, over-the-top villain performance. And while I haven't seen him in anything else, Martin Ellis more than delivers. Seriously, if they ever brought the Slitheen back, he needs to be a part of it. I had fun watching this for his attempts to channel Tim Curry alone.
At last, we've waited so long for this moment.
Times have been hard.
They've been closing in on us from all sides. Jadoon forcing us out. The other families against us. This will give us a new beginning. Wealth. Security.
Well, when we have the money, what then?
We'll buy a fleet of battle cruisers. Return home to Raxacorico, Phalapatorius. I shall smite the Grand Council, crush the Senate. The Blatherine and the Hostrazine will beg for mercy at my feet. But we mustn't get carried away. First things first, we have the equation. Nothing can stop us. Now it begins.
Otherwise, this is about a school IT block featuring Slitheen trying to blow up the world. It's very much same old, same old. It feels like School Reunion crossed with the Aliens of London two-parter from New Who, except for a younger crowd. The drama is mostly Maria and Luke trying to fit into a new school, and Luke feeling like an outsider due to him literally being born yesterday, Sarah not knowing how to be a mother after being solo for so long in this operation, and the only other thing worth talking about drama-wise is Maria's parents being divorced causes a lot of friction. Like a lot of kids' media, the parents, save for Sarah, have no clue that their child is fighting aliens. Otherwise, I don't really like the Slitheen, so my views on this episode is something that I'm not sure if it's indicative of the quality of the episode of itself, or if it's not that great, Ellis aside, but I think this is only okay. I've also decided to not really talk about the filmmaking techniques because I like this transition in episode 1, but otherwise this is mostly from a time period where TV and movies were very different in terms of presentation. It was around Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, where TV shows felt indistinguishable from movies, and this is before, so it's mostly vaguely competent with less time and money than a movie, but made up for by how much of it there is. I don't think it's fair to criticize stuff like the awful CGI when nothing on TV from around this time had good CGI. Otherwise, the cliffhanger from part 1 is a little laughable. One of those kids being the Slitheen just invokes images from... For me, it just invokes images of stuff like jumping around the hospital in Postal 2 to avoid psychotic Gary Coleman's. There's a sentence that, unless you've played Postal 2, you will not know the context of. Maybe I'll play it on my channel. Otherwise, this is the introduction of Clyde, another character who falls into this aliens thing and helps save the world. He basically works out that Slitheen's aversion to vinegar and sets himself apart from the others. A weird tangent here, but at the end, Clyde keeps asking about killing the Slitheen, and instead of sparing them, and what's weird about this is that it literally happened in the previous episode. I doubt everyone who worked at that evil soda factory got out in time before it exploded. I don't remember if Sarah killed anyone before or though either, so I can't complain that it's out of character like I can with the Doctor. Yeah, the Doctor kills, no ifs, no buts.
No second chances. I'm that sort of a man.
I never would. Have you got that? I never would.
It's just weird that they want to invoke this moral dilemma in New Who, except when they don't. The thing is that I wouldn't be complaining about this in this show unless they brought it up. The Eye of the Gorgon is next, and while the villain's performance is nowhere near as fun as Martin Ellis's, I actually think this is a little better than the previous one, to be honest. I think with Clyde there, it helps a dynamic that complements each other pretty well. I know there are more characters coming, but otherwise I like how all three have their own strengths and flaws to bring to the table. Otherwise I like the Gorgon being this parasitical alien from a form that feeds off humans while extending their own lives and turning people into stone. Also, remember how I said Doctor Who has flimsy continuity? Here's a good example, because in The Mind Robber, Troughton's Doctor went to a world where everything that doesn't exist does exist, and it can all change based on the whims of a master of that domain. Think of where this is as outside the boundaries of the Who universe, except further out than the Doctor's wife. There's Medusa there, so I'm just bringing this up to people who thought Doctor Who ever had consistent lore. I also like the cliffhanger more. While this is a kid's show and you wouldn't stick to the father turning into a stone statue, conscious yet unmoving. I mean, he's the main character after all, so that's reserved for these poor guys. That punch is definitely more effective than Mini Slitheen, because how they were going to explain this was something that I wasn't sure how they'd pull off. Also, remember how I said that the parents have no clue what's going on? Well, here is the first time where something almost gives the games away, but it resorts to gaslighting when everything's wrapped up. Also interesting is that there's a couple in this episode, Bea and Edgar, who did archaeological digs around the world and dug up alien artifacts. I'm bringing this up because an Indiana Jones style thing with Doctor Who aliens leading to units or whatever else you can think of would be an amazing spin-off. I'm just saying because currently they want to expand Who again with spin-offs. There's one idea. Otherwise, I never got how the Gorgon was brainwashing the nuns. Stuff like there being kidnapping, secret passages, and jail cells in this abbey is something I see as Who logic and kid show logic meeting, so that's all fine with me. It was just they're brainwashed rather than coming to this conclusion themselves somehow, and when the Gorgon is defeated, it turns out they're right. I also really like the scene where Bea is at peace after getting the talisman and reminding her of Edgar while her mind's going. I just like it. Otherwise, I'm not sure if it's hit its stride, but otherwise these episodes are getting better. The Warriors of Cudluck actually feels more 90s than anything else. I get that laser tag is popular, but using laser tag as a front for villains to do insidious things with children sounds like a crazy scheme to imprison Alex Mack. That and there are Space Invaders clones, video game arcades. This came out in 2007, so it's a bit weird to see kids play Space Invaders clones and not Portal, Mass Effect, Bioshock, Halo 3, Uncharted 1. Or you could be like me and be stuck with a PS2 for a few years, so I'd be left with the Simpsons game. Random tangent, but even the clearly dying PS2 library was more mechanically complex. Kids would be playing that, not Space Invaders. Half my channel's devoted to retro games, I had to call this out. Now I remember screaming ads from back then dying out, so why this episode's aliens rely so heavily on it, I have no idea. If this was the 90s and set in a full arcade, I'd buy this. It's just so weird coming from someone who lived this. When you get past that, the drama is about Luke and Clyde trying to be on the same page about the difference between humour and bullying, as Luke does unwillingly bullying a child before they go missing due to lack of social skills. Although it really amounts to nothing as they find the kid, it's not even brought up. It's an alien using laser tag of all things to recruit child soldiers in their war, and of course, those two get kidnapped and Sarah tries to get her son back, and Maria is just kind of there in this. Her parents don't even show up. Otherwise, the idea of kidnapping children to turn into soldiers for war is actually pretty dark for a show like this, and I don't think it gels all that well. At least not without demonstrably showing raised stakes rather than this just being another week for them. That, and while the Cudlack is probably the best villain thus far, on the level of actually taking him seriously, the twist ending being that he's been answering to an AI that has suppressed a decade of peace in his war is one of those twists which really doesn't recontextualize anything in the story in a way that's constructive. It's not a good twist ending. It feels like the Doctor's daughter war only been going on for a week while also getting 60,000 generations of soldiers, and both are heavy and handed anti-war episodes that have a twist ending that shatters the reality of the show. Yeah, I don't like this, but so far 3 out of 4 isn't bad. What Happened to Sarah Jane is next, and interesting of note here, the director of this is Graham Harper, who New Who fans know for directing Journey's End, but I know him for The Caves of Androzani, which, combined with my rant at the beginning of how I wouldn't judge the filmmaking techniques because TV back then is very different to TV now, is worth talking about, because I did recommend Caves of Androzani specifically because of it being a good story with amazing filmmaking techniques for the time. And the shot on multi-camera style productions of Classic Who. I bring this up because Classic Who is even affecting the spin-offs in small ways like this, and I have an entire video talking about where to start. This one is about a memory box that Maria uses the night someone rewrites history and seems to change the timeline. The Doctor hates people interfering with history when it's not them doing it. I checked the dates, and this wasn't during any season of New Who, if you want me to get serious. I always thought that time meddling really should be the Doctor's forte. With that said, the implication here is that the time, about 40 years real time of canon, was altered. Not in a this is debatably canon way, as in Sarah travelling with a Doctor is one of those things that nobody really disputes except for here. Anyway, these people think Maria's on a psychotic break of some kind, but there's a ticking clock element of an asteroid hitting Earth. I feel like the stakes were already high, considering that she's one of the 3 defenses Earth had, and Torchwood and Unit are shown to be not the best, depending on how the writer's feeling. That and Maria's methods for getting to the bottom of this is very cringe-inducing. Like, Sarah gets replaced with Andrea, who died in 1964, and Maria assumes she's in on whatever happened instead of the far crueler idea that they swap places and she's entirely blameless, just there to not defend the Earth. I actually thought that was what the episode was going for, but in the last 10 minutes of part 1, they completely shoot that idea in the foot for not being morally complex. The opportunity for this morality gets further shot in the foot when Andrea is fine with erasing children from existence to save her own life. But either way, the cliffhanger between parts is probably the best thus far, with Maria getting erased but her father being the only one who remembers. Doctor Who aliens could win so frequently if they clean up. And she gets transported to 1964, where Sarah was supposed to live but doesn't. Remember the canon rant? Here's another really good example of this. The year is more important than you'd think. See, the unit staff in Pertwee's era was initiated due to the trial the Doctor had in the War Games, where he was exiled to solely live on Earth in the second half of the 20th century. And that's all the dates given at the time, meaning the wriggle room of when these were supposed to be set was also there, save for the Web of Fear taking place in 1979, which features Unit and the Brigadier, although he wasn't promoted to Brigadier until the invasion, which was after that story was set. Meaning that every Unit story was set after that. There's also in the Periods of March, Sarah saying that she's from 1980, implying that all the Pertwee stories and the invasion take place inside a year, which is just unlikely considering Pertwee ages among other things. But Mordred Undead says the Brigadier retired in 1976, meaning that when they were set is when they were broadcast. If you have a headache trying to make sense of this, then good. Here is exactly one of my points about this right in front of you. I even tried double checking this. It's so messy. Otherwise, this actually has the father for a significant chunk of the second part working this out for himself, which is a decent cliffhanger overall to the episode, as there's no way to break to your parents gently that they have the spatial awareness of a blind squirrel. So, in The Lost Boy, he takes it well, all things considered. By take it well, I mean he knows and is on the adventures with Maria and Clyde. Yet, otherwise only really needs a rest of the series recap by the end of the story. The plot here is that Luke is not Luke, but Ashley, a child that could have been kidnapped by the Bane and experimented on when his real parents are out there wondering if he's alive or not. And just kidding, it's Slitheen again. I don't know what about the Slitheen made them the series finale material, but there isn't arting. However, there is even narrower skin suits, which is just really weird. I like the fart jokes, but shouldn't that mean they'd be constantly passing gas? Wouldn't that make the press conferences really awkward? Do I just not understand that tech? Either way, none of these performances are as fun as Martin Ellis's, so it's instantly worse than episodes 2 and 3. The twist ending of part 1 is that Mr. Smith, who in the previous episodes is Sarah's supercomputer that helps out, is really a Xyloc, who tricked the Slitheen and Sarah to play both sides against the middle so he can get Luke to telekinetically Majora's Mask Earth to free the other Xylocs. They're apparently crystal entities that crashed here 60 million years ago, and it's being passed around until meeting Sarah, who basically got her to build Mr. Smith as per his instructions, and have her trust him so he can make this happen. This finally features the second appearance of K9 on the show. It's a robot dog shooting a computer so it can play a DVD. Either way, it's all about family. The press cycle about Ashley that colors Sarah to the rest of the world is forgotten about, and Maria's dad is a computer nerd so much he constructs a virus that takes out an alien supercomputer in less than an hour. I said he acclimates Isis to this quickly. So that's the Sarah Jane Adventures Series 1. Overall, I did enjoy it. It's just Doctor Who style adventures with a bit of a sillier tone. I said in my last video like this that kids media either has to charm you into getting sucked in, or there's something there for adults, and Doctor Who had that enough, so much so that people get defensive when you call it a kids show, because while it is, its audience has grown up and never stopped watching. This show, to its credit, while it can't have the longevity of Doctor Who for very unfortunate reasons, it also does the same things, but clearly leaning more into charming the audience than trying to get adults on board. In fact, the tone it went for had me buy the sillier concepts more so than New Who from around this time. Make of that whatever you will. I hope this maintains its quality, and yes, I will be doing more of this, and I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please like it, share it, and subscribe.